everybody. Welcome to a special episode of Design Recharge. This is episode actually 324. Today, I am excited to announce that Lydia and I have been working on a project since, I think you asked me maybe in May or April, but I don't remember. I didn't get busy working on it till like September. I mean, we worked on little things and I have all my sketches and everything to show. But I kind of wanted to give people an idea of, you've done a lot of research and you're a writer. So I am going to kind of ask some questions that are based on some of those things. And then we'll talk about the process. And if anybody has any questions, I'd love to get y'all's questions answered. All right. So Lydia, tell us a little bit. You're a freelance writer, right?
Yes. Yes.
Right.
I've been doing this for about 14 years. So when I had my first child, I decided I wanted to just have a schedule that was more flexible. So I've been freelancing on my own for about 14 years. The majority of my experience is nonfiction articles on parenting topics. But I've also been a craft book editor. I've written for a local city magazine. I've written for a dog magazine. I've done neighborhood newsletters, all kinds of things.
So you and I used to work together in Denver. She's in Denver, but you're not from Denver. You're from the Midwest, right?
Nope, I'm from Indiana. Yep, Southern Indiana.
That's the state I want Taylor Ackerman to be from, but she's not. She's from Illinois. I don't know where she's from originally, but anyway, she lives there now. And she's an incredible illustrator too. So you and I worked together. Here's the thing I remember about Lydia. She moved to Denver, and you know what she got? Do you remember what you got, Lydia? You and your roommate? You got a trampoline. Do you remember that? Look, she's like, I've had kids. I don't remember. You had a trampoline. Or you had a trampoline as a kid or something. I think you had a trampoline.
I didn't.
You didn't ever? I swear. Anyway.
No, I mean, I have one now, but I didn't back then.
Well, maybe we just talked about it because both of us really like jumping on trampolines.
Yeah, I think I jumped on my neighbor's trampoline. Like, that's what it was. I was in a duplex, so that must have been what it was.
That was it.
Yeah, I was in a duplex, and the neighbor in the duplex had a trampoline, so that must have been it.
That was totally it. That was it. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get a trampoline like Lydia. And I did when I was 30. That's what I got myself one time. I did a little extra job, and I was like, this is enough money for a trampoline. And I'm like, I don't know any 30-year-old that goes and gets himself a trampoline. I didn't have the screen or anything, like it was just the balls to the wall trampoline, fall off the edge, I guess.
Well, you were 30, so hopefully you can handle it.
Yeah, I was safe enough. So you've done all this nonfiction writing, but it's different to write a children's book. It's actually really difficult because there's only a few pages and you can't have a ton of words on the page.
Yes, definitely. My experience in nonfiction article writing didn't really serve me that well in writing picture books, is what I found. It's a completely different industry. What I've learned in researching picture books is that right now the industry wants you to write in about 500 words for approximately a 32-page book. That's what I was telling, especially for a new author, which I was. They said you need to pare it down. So it looks like the text is very simple, but the text is very well thought out. It's been revised multiple times. And from what I learned, more experienced writers told me, every word should be purposeful. There should be no extraneous adjectives and things like that. And the biggest reason why is because they want you to leave space for the illustration. It's a marriage between the writer and the illustrator. It isn't just your words. And as a picture book writer, you have to always be considering how you can leave space for the illustrator.
Right. Okay. So, all right. So then you started doing research, but you'd been writing children's books, right? This was not your first one. It's just the first one you had illustrated, right?
Yes. This was the first one that a publishing company said yes to. Basically, I've been writing picture books for about 8 years. This is the first one to be published. I do have an agent that I work with for about 2 years, and she was also getting turned down. There's a lot of rejection in the picture book writing process. And so this story, it resonated with this company, Elk Lake Publishing, that published our book, and they said yes to it. And then we started to move forward.
All right. So tell me about your agent, getting an agent, because a lot of us think about, I mean, as designers or illustrators, sometimes we have agents and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we don't. What, as a writer, what does the agent do? Do they try to get you into publishers, or do they try to connect you with illustrators, or what is the...
The agent for a picture book writer tries to connect you with publishing companies. They try to get a publishing company to say yes to you. And I think you can still submit on your own. And certainly I did a lot of submitting on my own and I was unsuccessful. So then I started submitting to agents, and I got an agent with WordWise Media to say yes to me. And then she started submitting my work to publishing companies. So I no longer had to do the submitting, but I had provided her with my proposal and all the information that she needed so that she could then submit it to companies.
So, all right. So when you do that, and do you have to sign something with her? Are you like bound to her for a certain number of years?
I did. I can only speak for the company I work with. I'm sure every agency does a little differently. I did sign a contract with her, but as she explained to me, if it didn't go well, if she's unable to sign my work with a publishing company, then we would dissolve our partnership if it's not working. And it's taken a while. Even what was interesting, after getting an agent, it took her a while to get a yes to one of my picture books as well. So that's, I think, what I learned. I kind of thought everyone would say yes to an agent, and not necessarily. It very much depends on what those certain publishing companies are looking for at the time.
I got you. So tell me about that, because that's something else that's kind of an interesting portion of this, is that you now realize some of the things that are really hot in the industry, and some of the things that have to do, and then we'll get into what the book's about in just a second. But
Sure.
What are some of the things that these publishing companies are looking for?
Sure. Well, what I'm hearing time and time again is diversity, and kind of all kinds of diversity. They're looking for more stories from people of color. They're looking for neurodiversity, such as what our book is about, just different ways of thinking, different perspectives, just diversity of all kinds. And that seems to be what I'm hearing again and again in the marketplace. And so I guess I shouldn't be surprised that this book that deals with neurodiversity was the one that was accepted, because, so I think some of my other stories were good, but they didn't have really that angle. They weren't necessarily offering something new to the marketplace that hasn't been there before. I can't hear you. Sorry.
Coughed, and I had it on mute. Sorry about that. I'm like, blah, 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 blah. So when you're reading the book, you don't necessarily know it's about neurodiversity. You don't know it's about a car with ADHD. You actually have to read the author's note and possibly our acknowledgments and things like that. So how, I mean, is that absolutely critical to be like, Victor has ADHD, right? Because the name of the car is Victor.
Right. No, and I would say that was purposeful. I didn't want it to necessarily be Victor has ADHD. Victor is a regular car that has an engine that sounds differently. And to me, that's very relatable to a lot of kids and adults. Some disabilities are very obvious and you can see it, but some differences and some forms of uniqueness are hidden. Like in Victor's case, it's his engine, it's the way his mind works. And you can't see that. You can't see differences of the mind when you're looking at little kids in a classroom or groups of adults in a workplace. And so that was very purposeful. My hope was that all people that were just unique or different would find something to resonate with this book.
So with this, why is Victor in this story so important to you? Why does it hit home for you?
I kind of developed Victor based on my son's diagnosis with ADHD. He's a regular looking kid. He's a bright boy. He doesn't look any different than anyone else. But because of his ADHD, in his case, he tends to talk a lot. And he will sometimes be disrespectful. He will talk out of turn. He will inappropriately comment. This is all part of his ADHD. He doesn't have the hyperactivity piece, although sometimes he does. But according to the doctor's diagnosis, he has a form of inattentive ADHD, which just, and the way it manifests in him is that he talks and talks and talks and talks. And that's frustrating. That's frustrating to teachers. That's frustrating to caregivers or anyone who's been in charge of him, because they see him as a regular boy. They're like, oh, come on. He needs to just suck it up and learn how to be respectful. I found that a lot of people saw his learning difference as they just thought he was being disrespectful. They didn't see it as a difference of the mind or a disability. They just wondered why he couldn't suck it up and behave. And that was a big reason why I wrote this book. Not only, I hate to call it a disability, because I also think it's very much a gift. The talking, the creativity that comes out of his ADHD brain is such a gift. It's not necessarily something to be squashed. And that's what the book talks about also.
So this is like me as a kid, man. I was Solly, like I still am a chatty Cathy, and I think I always did, but I think that it was not something that my parents, it wasn't something that maybe that was diagnosed as much, and I definitely don't think that it was something that my parents would have wanted me to connect to. My mom read the acknowledgments, and where I say, hey, I was diagnosed this summer with ADHD, and she's like, when were you done? When did that happen? And I'm like, well, I did it this summer. And my big one was inattentiveness. And if people know me, like they've been around me, I do have a lot of energy, but in hyperactivity, I was like an 80 percentile, which I don't know, maybe that's not a lot, but for hyperactivity, it was like 99. I'm not inattentiveness, the focus, the inability to focus was a 99 percentile. And so it was always a struggle for me in school. And so it wasn't that, and when you asked me to do this, I hadn't been diagnosed. I had big inklings that this is what it was, and I've told people that I had that, but I hadn't ever been officially diagnosed. And I had a client who's a therapist, and she's like, Dinah, I've known you for 7 years. I have something I need to ask you. And so she, cause she's known me so long. So she had that, she had an idea that that's what was up with me, and she wanted to test it and make sure. And it was a very stressful, busy, I piled too much on my plate this summer. It was an awesome summer. It was absolutely incredible, but I get overwhelmed. Not that I didn't stop anything or do anything different, but it was, it really pushed my, abilities. But I'm like you. I think that this is a superpower. And the guy who wrote the Underpants books, I don't know what his name is.
Oh, yeah. Dave Pilkey, I believe.
But it's Captain Underpants or something, right?
Yes, Captain Underpants. I believe that's the author. I hope I'm not saying it wrong, but yes.
And he really thinks of it as the ADHD part as a superpower. This is something allows him. He writes like 3 or 4 books a year, and these are not like 32-page books. These are longer books for older kids, right?
Sure. Yeah, he writes a lot of graphic novels, and they resonate. Like his work is very popular. Peter Reynolds is another. He wrote a picture book called Happy Dreamer, and he wrote it based on. He's not diagnosed as an adult man, but he wrote it based on his ADHD tendencies that he noticed in himself. And, very popular illustrator. He's written many other books, The Dot and things like that.
Lydia would tell me, like, she's like, have you seen this? I'm like, And I'm like, I don't have any kids. Remember, Lydia, like, I'm the only kid in my house besides my husband, I guess. So it was important for you to write the story about Victor. I just want to close this one question off because, and there are some specific things that if you knew that that was what the book was about, there are some parts of it. And can I share one spread?
Sure.
All right. Maybe we'll share a few more, but I'm going to for sure. This was the one that, man, makes me cry. And I've read this book like a ton of times, but it really kind of hits home. All right, let's see. Hopefully you guys can see this. You'll probably see more than what I'm trying to show you. I'm just trying to show you this one. Oh, now maybe you can see. You guys have to tell me. Lydia, you have to read the comments because I can't tell. But this is where he's kind of sent away, or he goes away from his friends, right? And he's ashamed. I think that's how I drew it was. Oh, and he's a car, by the way, people. But and Lydia was very specific. She's like, oh, and she's like, it'll be his hood popped open, and then I just had drawn these things, and then she's like, it should be colorful. And it's like, maybe his engine is more colorful than other people's. And this is one of the parts that I love. And he, so he is ashamed. That's the feeling. And he's like, Victor drove and drove until he reached Nick the mechanic's garage. He popped his hood. And I still can't do it without crying. But he says, can you fix my engine? And he revved it. And he said, you hear that? Well, can you fix it? And then Nick says, fix it? That's one powerful engine you've got there. That's exactly the way it's supposed to sound. Come on, Nick said, let me show you what you can do with it. And I think that to me, that's the page that always gets me. But it's like, oh, you don't have to be ashamed. It's okay for you to be this way. And it really isn't anything that's bad. And I think that, I don't know if Sally feels this way, but it can be where teachers or parents get frustrated and I know I was yelled at a lot, maybe not necessarily in class, but I know that I always got N's in conduct, which means needs improvement, and now I actually think it's one of my best traits is that I can talk to people and that I'm not afraid to talk to people, and that that I'm super thankful. I never knew how to use it, never really knew how to use my engine like that, but it's to me a very important part of who I am, just even doing this podcast or with being a teacher or just being a designer in a field where sometimes we end up being alone a lot,
Right.
So I don't know. Can you elaborate a little bit?
Absolutely. I mean, and that's so after my son's diagnosis, I started reading this book by Dr. Edward Hallowell and John Rady called Delivered from Distraction, about ADHD. And what I loved about this book is it elaborated on exactly what you just said. He doesn't see it as something wrong. He sees it as something that can be developed and that can be a gift and that can actually, allow you to do what you were meant to do in this world. He's a doctor. The author is a doctor, and he said, it is not in spite of my ADHD, but because of my ADHD that I was able to become a doctor. And that might not be the exact words, but he says a lot, and he gives a lot of encouragement about, this is who you are. This is the way your brain works. And it's exactly the way it's supposed to be. Just kind of like Nick the mechanic tells Victor in the book. It's on mute again.
Because I had to cough. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I guess for me, it's that there's so much, especially in school, and I see this as a teacher, like it is hard for me when I'm trying to control a room. It's hard when you have one kid who just is really wanting to contribute, to be honest. That's all it is. Or they really want attention, and so It's one of the two. And I always feel like there's really nothing wrong with that, but it's not helpful for everybody else.
Of course. It's not easy. It's not easy to have this kind of brain.
Right. But there are ways, especially in the creative field, that this really comes into as really a powerful, and clearly even in the medical field, because I think you're problem solving as an engineer, as a computer information technology kind of person, as a doctor, you are solving problems that some people have maybe solved, but there's not a ton, like you can't Google what the answer is, as a
Right.
creative problem, it's the same. So to me, I know that people were frustrated with me, but I was loved. I felt like I was nice enough, and people, and I think that's probably the way Solly is too. It wasn't like it was coming out in anger,
Right.
his
Yeah.
it wasn't aggressive, I guess. But I think what's great is that we all are different, and that sometimes school really pushes us to follow the line. You need to do this. And this is kind of like, oh, well, we all have a different path. And I think that's it's very different of how maybe schooling is in the US. There's kind of like you need to do this, you need to make good grades, and I wasn't like the best grades kid, like I had to really study. I didn't do well on those SATs or those standardized tests,
Mhm.
ACT tests or something. I mean, my parents made me take like 4 times. They were like, I'm sure you could do better. And I'm like, I can't. This is it. Like, I got into the school I wanted to get. Please do not make me take this test again. But I think for me, it just is, it's okay to have your own path. You
Mhm.
still have to live in that world. But
Sure.
I think that there's some things that, because of this, it does allow me to have more energy to do things. And it does allow me to have, I can kind of keep balls rolling.
Mhm.
I feel like I can juggle the 4 jobs that I have better maybe than somebody else who doesn't have this. And so I really do think of this as a strength, not
Mhm.
something that I'm ashamed of at all. So we talked about the trends in the publishing business and this neurodiversity, which really could be anything. So people with Asperger's or autism, or stories about somebody with Down syndrome, or
Sure.
it's something in that realm, right? Those would all be neurodiversity issues.
Sure. Yes. Any of that, any diversity that isn't immediately obvious when you look at a person is what I consider to be neurodiversity.
Okay. All right. So then, um, so why is what we got to do rare? Meaning you get the contract and then you contact me.
Sure. Well, usually, at least, again, this is my first picture book, but what I have been told by writers who have done this more often is that usually a company will say yes to your manuscript, and they will pair you with a different illustrator that you don't know. That often the editors will say, I'm already picturing, I want this style of art, and I know the exact illustrator who can do it. I've heard that a few times. When I read the manuscript, I'm already thinking I want to call this person to do the work. Um, in our case, with Elk Lake Publishing, which is a smaller publishing company, they said yes. And the first thing they asked me was, do you have an illustrator? And I was like, nope, but I can maybe find one. And so they have, they could have given me suggestions if in fact I didn't know you, and if I didn't have any connections in the world of design and illustration. But I immediately thought of you. And again, I didn't know about the ADHD, and I knew you were a creative person, and I know that you like creative challenges, and I know that you say yes to a lot of things. And so I just there was this little, we hadn't talked in many years. And there was this little voice in the back of my head that just kept saying, call Diane, call Diane. And that was how it happened. And so Elk Lake Publishing allowed us to work together as author illustrator. And then Diane also designed the book, which isn't their usual route. But what I liked about working with a smaller company is that they were open to it. They said, sure, let's try it. Let's give it a chance. And so, yeah, what it allowed us to do is to collaborate through the whole process, which I've been told that's not usual. Your manuscript goes to the illustrator, and there's not a lot of collaboration that happens during the production process. At least that's what I've been told by other writers.
So that was something I really enjoyed, because I am not a car person. So Lydia really came to me and she's like, Solly and I were in the car and he saw a Volkswagen Rabbit or a Golf or some one of
Yep.
these a Rabbit, right? Or a Golf.
Yeah, it's a rabbit. This grandpa that picks up at school drives a Volkswagen Rabbit.
And Solly said what about this car?
He's like, oh, it's the cutest car I've ever seen. And the funny thing is, it was also my very first car when I was 16. And I never thought of it as cute. Like at the time, it was old and not fancy or flashy. And I was like, oh, how funny that he thinks a Volkswagen Rabbit is so cute. But when I saw it, so I saw this grandpa that drives every day, and I'm like, oh, it is kind of cute. And so then I talked to Diane, and so that was kind of the model for Victor because it's regular. Like, it's not so regular now in like student parking lots, but when I was a kid, the Volkswagen Rabbit, the little Chevettes, those were very common little regular cars that were inexpensive that a lot of students had. And that's kind of what I wanted. I wanted Victor to be like a regular little boy car.
Right. So there were pages that I avoided. I think that one of the first pages I did was I went to Auburn and I introduced Lydia to her husband, and her husband went to Auburn with me. And if you didn't know, I'm gonna I'll just do this one other. I'm going to show you just a couple other spreads. This spread is not the Auburn spread, but I'll show that. But so one of the things was when we were picking the kind of cars I did, and I thought I had it, but Lydia, I guess I don't, unless it's in this one. I'll keep looking. But one of the things that I was like, oh, okay. So I made a bunch of little drawings. Some were watercolor because I was trying to do character studies. And I'd never done this, I don't know what I'm doing. I just know from people I've interviewed, what I was trying to do. And that's what they did. So I was like, well, maybe I can do it too, So they would do character studies. So I showed her, and I think I showed you this first. This, you said the Volkswagen Golf, and I did a drawing like this. So it was kind of like a weird shape kind of drawing, I guess, of the car, and it wasn't very good. And then I did three other ones, and then I did one that was a collage. And you can tell that Victor, oh well, it's busted up right there, but there he is. And you can't super tell right here, I guess, but if I scoot up to this one, you can tell that Victor is my favorite. The inside, and I'll stop my share for a second, is the inside of an AT&T envelope. And I love this. You can see this is a Victor cutout. This is a Victor.
Oh, I love that you still have the cutouts.
Yeah, some of them I didn't have to like rip up so bad, but this could still be a little Victor right here, I think. But that I love the inside of security envelopes, and my mom gets AT&T. She has her cell phone or her internet's through AT&T. My internet's through AT&T, and they're always like, do you want to go paperless? I'm like, no, I need those envelopes, people, bring it on. So for me, I always think, I've done a few projects, self-directed projects that use these envelopes, because I also often feel like these are overlooked. And to me, for me to be able to have people look at the inside of an envelope in a new way, in a beautiful way, and think of something else that they could do with it. It's very similar to the story of Victor, right? That that these are things that are often overlooked and are often thrown away, or often not used to their potential.
Yeah, underestimated.
But really, and you can see in the scan, sometimes you can see a little bit of the texture from the side of the envelope that, they're trying to sell you something or whatever. But that to me was a really important part. And so I did use a bunch of a bunch of envelopes. So this, the inside of this right here, these little cones are a World Vision envelope. His bumper is always like a Discover card or SunTrust Bank envelope. They have the same insides. The trees are books. And then I think this is the inside of an envelope. I don't know what kind of envelope, I can't remember, but I tried to just smatter these throughout. And to me, it was really fun. Now, I used a lot of just like scrapbook paper, which also has history between me and Lydia because we both worked at a scrapbooking company. But one of the things was this one, and this is it's a, oh, you can't see it. I'm like talking and I realize nobody can see anything. I'm sharing like this tree, but you can't see it. And the World Vision envelope you can't see, but now you can maybe, right? These are World Vision envelopes. This is the inside of a book. The trunks of the tree. His bumper is always the Discover card or the my SunTrust Bank or whatever. And then this tire is the other one that's the inside of an envelope. Sorry, I didn't realize I was not showing you. But this is Auburn. So I went to Auburn. Derek, her husband, went to Auburn. I introduced them. They're still together, thankfully. And but this is like, Auburn was a really special place for me where I feel like I finally found my voice. It's how I wanted to become a teacher. And so I did it as the town center. And I used all retro supply brushes, which if you're not familiar, my friend Dustin Lee is the owner at Retro Supply. And he made these brushes, or Suzanne did, one of my students that works for him. And I'll show you these originals, and I'll just try to get something so that I can show you one other tiny little thing. But for me, when we were working, it was really important. There were some pages that I really was lost. I didn't know. I was like, Lydia, I don't know what you want from this. And we kind of went back and forth on a few, and I definitely changed some in the computer, but some I just wasn't able to change because or in person, like physical copy, which I'll show you some, but, and I messed up a couple times, like I had, the Victor, his tires and everybody's tires was this one thing that I'd gotten from my friend Noah Scalen. I bought a whole bunch of scrap collage paper. And so his, there's Victor, and his tires are cool. I mean, clearly these two are not that great, but these two were pretty, you see the texture, I guess, in there, but you can see and I did watercolor on top of it. It wasn't like it was all, but clearly I can't cut real well, his lights aren't super perfect, but I did all the line work on the iPad. I had gotten an iPad Pro, and you can kind of see these a little bit better, but this was like a beast to try to put together. And this one, I was like, there's no way I can match it up, because I had to match everything up in the computer. And so everything's really cut out. Everything's tiny where it's tiny, and like it's little, like you can see how tiny these little cuts were that I was making with my fingers, or whatever. And then there's the other cars. And then I did all the brushwork and stuff in the computer because it was I had more control. And Dustin had made these brushes. And one of the things was we added the tracks, the tire or Victor's tracks later. And because that was one of the things I kept avoiding. I had done the town. I had done the town, but I didn't have the path. And I was like, I just don't know, Lydia. I don't know what I'm going to do. And we went through all these options. There were in the iPad and in the Retro Supply brushes. I think it was, I can't remember, Texture Tone or something. I'll make sure it's in the link. It'll be in the link below. But she was like, it should be crazy. He has a crazy path. And so his path is very consistent, and it is the color of his car. And then there is a time at the very end of the book where all of his friends are also colored. And Rose, I made her a little electric car. So she has a real grid kind of pattern. And then Sam we talked about even the colors of these cars, what colors. Me and Lydia both decided what colors these should be. And then we made Jane a truck, and we have this truck. Granted, it's like rusty colored in our yard, but we have this old 1970 Chevrolet truck. And on the back, instead of saying Chevrolet, it says Jane. So to me, it was fun, and I could just go out and take pictures of Jane, right, whenever I needed it. And you could kind of see, like, here's a little bitty of Jane. So I would print out and I did it at 60%, which I don't know why I did that because it made it harder, but I definitely added like the watercolor pencils that I love. Here I would get confused on who I was doing. And so I had to put them all together so that you could see kind of the whole path, but I had to have the one next to it. And sometimes I would be like, this one's on a jack, you know? So I would write myself a note that I wasn't missing the tire or something. And I sometimes did them more than once. And working so small was hard, to be honest. And we did the cover first. That was one thing, and it sort of scared me. And I messed up on one of the pages that his hubcaps were supposed to be this color, and I did not make them this color, and it was terrible. So I just photoshopped them. Right?
And I didn't even notice. I remember when you told me that, but you know, I think as a writer and a designer illustrator, we were both looking at so many different things. So I didn't even notice the hubcaps.
So this was the cover. And obviously I changed it. It has a background, but I needed a lot of space at the top because I wanted to be able to write Victor in the Vroom. And then this actually gets cut. And my mastermind group helped me with some of the coloring and things like this. So I was very thankful. This, I gave it a little bit more shadow in the computer, I think. But all this is just collage on top and then watercolored on top of that. But it's really fun. He's really fun little, my mom's like, I hope nobody's inside with the doors open. I think that's hilarious.
Yeah, I love that spread. I mean, I know it's the cover and it's also in the interior of the book, but I keep thinking of it as Victor's let it go moment, you know, when he realizes that his unique engine is actually a good thing and the mechanic has shown him what it can do. And so that thing with him flying, it's like it's Victor's let it go moment.
Yeah, and so this is a different one. But again, you can kind of see the tires. I think the tires are really cool. Mm-hmm. And then I just put it together in the computer. But this one is like my most proud one, I think, because it was so tiny. I don't know why I was working so small. But look at how tiny this collage is. I'm going to put my finger here so you can see this little one is cut and all these trees. This is a build. You can kind of see like this is one piece, but I had to cut the roof and this tiny tree. And what was I thinking? You know, like this was crazy, but this was the most joyful project I've worked on in a very long time. And I guess you can kind of tell because I'm kind of geeking out on it, but I loved that I could use Auburn as an interior place because it was talking about the town center. And I was really thankful that I could do that. One of the things that Lydia and I did, maybe that was very unique. I'm going to show this in a different way so that maybe people can see it. But she gave me the words and she had it figured out what words went on which page. And then I just took that and I printed it out and then I just drew next to it. And these were ideas. And sometimes they ended up kind of becoming that. And the tumors corner, I just used Google Earth or whatever to help me with that. Hopefully that's legal. I did use a Google font that my friend Thomas Jockin had created with Dr. Bonnie Shaver Troop, who she's an educational therapist who helps all the sounds are done in a typeface that we all can use. It's called Lexend, and it helps people who have dyslexia or anybody who's tired reading at night, or it just helps because it's a variable font. So it's really cool. But I don't know if this helps anybody else, but this really was like, at some point we crossed this out. This wasn't going to be done. And Lydia and I really went back and forth. And the first one, the very first spread was one of the last spreads I had done. And Lydia was like, well, maybe we could put all the cars there. And I'm like, oh my gosh, Lydia, I'm supposed to have this on Thursday. And it's like Tuesday. And I'm like, huh. And she's like, well, maybe you can use that one that we didn't use. It was all four of the cars across. And I was like, that's what I'm going to do. And I just flipped rows and then it all worked out. So I think just knowing that she had the better idea, even though it wasn't easy. This was a project I would start at 11 at night when I'd finished my other work because I knew I would stay up to do Victor because it was really, really fun. I don't know if that helps anybody to see. Carly, I appreciate So the publisher did not ask for any revisions, I don't believe. Lydia, do you know the answer to that?
To the, not to
The
the art.
art.
No, not to the art at all. I did make small revisions. They did review the manuscript that I submitted. They did ask me for some pretty minor revisions to the text, which we did. It was interesting though, because Diane caught a missing word in the last stages when we thought everything was edited and perfect. And it's just proof that when you're so close to a project, sometimes you overlook things. And, you know, and then Diane caught, are we missing a word here? And we were. So thank goodness that more than one set of eyes were looking at the book.
So I think you just have to read it, and I would read it to my students, and I was like, I think there's a when that's missing. I'm going to tell, and then I kept forgetting, and then I was like, I read it one last time. I was like, I got to tell Lydia, and I think I text you, and I was like, I think when we blah, blah, blah. So is there something that you've learned or are learning that's important as you have shopped this story around?
Well, you know, kind of like I mentioned before, there's a lot of rejection in the picture book industry. Even if you have a good idea and a good story, I think that's just something that, and I know a lot of creative people are familiar with that. But you know, even though you have good ideas, it doesn't mean that the first person is going to say yes. In this case, my agent was the one who was shopping this around. She also has a child with ADHD, so it was a story that was close to her heart as well. I'm drawing a blank on, I don't know how many she sent it to initially, but I don't know, I guess that's what I've learned the most, that it takes a while. It takes a while, and there's a lot of rejection first, you know, before you get to your one yes. And I don't know.
Just don't give up.
Just don't give up. And again, this hasn't been my full-time job. I say I've been working on picture books for 8 years. It's always been a side project. Certainly, we're all working on many projects at the same time. So I wasn't certainly working full-time on picture books for 8 years. But thank goodness, or I would have been very depressed.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But it was always this side idea that I've always wanted to do. In that I write a lot of parenting articles on, different topics of the brain and behavior and things like that. I often see, when I'm interviewing these doctors and psychologists, gosh, that would make such a good picture book. I'm always thinking about ways that I can pare it down to a simple form so that people will be inspired that they're not the only one. They're not the only one going through this. And I did it all the time. My kids have heard me say it a million times. That would make a great picture book. But it's usually a complicated topic that I think would make a great picture book.
So, all right. So what is it? You told me about another advantage that a designer who's also an illustrator, who's also a writer, right? Maria, maybe you have something in you that you want to do. It's really an advantage for us in what way that you don't have?
Oh, sure. What I spend a lot of time, I do think there is an advantage to being a illustrator author together. Like if you can do both, I think there's definite benefits to that. I spend a lot of time prior to getting my agent. I spent a lot of time on different publishing companies' websites. Some of them say no picture book manuscripts at all. But many of them say we're open to author illustrators. I started seeing that again and again. Again, it's going to be different for every company. I can't say that this is across the board in the industry, but for companies that I was looking at, there were more that seemed to be open to an author illustrator rather than just an author like myself. So I hope that that's encouragement for illustrators and designers out there who might have a story in them, because I think even if you're not a writer, a lot of people have a story that they want to tell. And I would encourage you not to ignore that, because if you're already an illustrator, you're halfway there. I mean, there's many author illustrators that I've interviewed. I recently interviewed Jan Brett. She's an illustrator author that wrote The Mitten and many, many other books. And she said, "Oh, I'm an illustrator first. I'm not a writer. I can't speak well." Like she spent so much time talking about how she's not a writer, yet she's a best-selling author illustrator, and she's been doing this for 30 years. For her, the art comes first. But that doesn't mean that she can't write.
Right.
And I loved hearing that. And I hope, designers and illustrators out there will be encouraged by that. Judy Schachner that wrote the Skippy John Jones series. I had to interview her many years ago, and she said the same thing. She's an artist first. The words came secondary to her, but she could still do them.
Yeah. So that's good. We just might have to work on it a little bit more, I think, right?
Right. Just like I can't illustrate. Yeah, I wish I could. But
hey, maybe you could if you got some scissors and an AT&T envelope. So what are the next steps? Because we gave it to the publisher on last week was the final thing that I gave them. And then, so Veronica has a question first. So she said this may be asked first, but where do you look for publishers, or do you just search the internet? And you've been to conferences for this, right?
Sure. I'm a member of SCBWI, the Society of Children's Book Authors and Illustrators. So that is a great place to start. SCBWI. It's kind of.
I'm a member of that too.
Oh, cool! I didn't even know that. So that organization has been a huge help to me. I go to their conferences. A lot of what I've learned about picture book writing is from that company or from that organization. And there's always an illustrator track. Like if you're an illustrator, you can join just the same way a writer would join. And there's opportunities throughout the year. There's contests, things like that. They have resources that they produce that connect you with different publishers. The truth is, though, I search the internet looking for different publishers. And that's how I've found most of the ones that I've found. Oh, if I read a book, I'm a parent. My kids are a little older now, but a few years ago when I was reading more picture books to my kids, if I loved a story, I would always look to see who the publisher was. And then I would go to their website. And sometimes it was a common one that you might have heard, like Simon & Schuster or Macmillan. But sometimes it was these smaller independent publishing houses also that produced really, really great work. And so I would say if you read a picture book, spend some time in the library, just look through the picture book shelf. And if you see one that that's a great book, just open the flap and see who the publisher is, and then look up that publisher and see if they're accepting submissions. Many of them will tell you, I only accept submissions through agents. And some of them will still say, I accept unsolicited submissions, which would mean a submission directly from an author illustrator.
So Matt has a question. He said, have you considered self-publishing? Obviously, this is something that a lot of people have talked to as you've had multiple books that maybe were rejected from. Why was it important for you to not just self-publish this?
Sure. I guess I just wanted the support. I definitely think self-publishing is a great option for many people. I know many people who have self-published. For my first project, I just wanted the support of a company behind me. I don't know all the ins and outs of the publishing industry, even though I've worked in it for a long time. So that was my main reason. I guess I thought there was some security in that they know the back end of things. They know how to get the ISBN number and all of that. And I did not. Again, it's the route that I wanted to take. Certainly, if you have an idea and you want to self-publish, you're going to be able to do it a lot more quickly. So it just kind of depends on the route that you want to take.
Right. Okay. So, and also with self-publishing, it helps with distribution because these are not just going to be on Amazon. They are also in local bookstores, in libraries. Yep. And those are things that a publisher is going to have connections with.
Yes.
And they're going to do some. So some publishers would also do promos and the the marketing of it. This is something with this particular publisher. This is really more on us, which is fine. We are fine with that. So Carly's like, yes, distribution is really hard for illustrated books, and it's very costly, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So next steps, what's your vision or your hope?
My hope for the book.
Yeah. Not for us, because we're going to be friends forever. I mean, I think we've known each other. How long have you been married?
Gosh, 18 years.
I mean,
we've known each other for more than 20 years.
Yeah, more than 20 years.
Yeah, Diane introduced me to my husband, and we were married a couple years after that. And yeah, so it's been a really long time. We have a long history. I guess my hope for Victor as a book, that it will be encouraging to families that, not necessarily families that have an ADHD child or that have ADHD themselves, but just families where there's a uniqueness or a difference. I know a lady, she wrote a book called Differently Wired. Deborah Reber wrote a book called Differently Wired, and she discusses all kinds of kids who are just wired differently. I hope that this book is an encouragement to families with someone like that. And there are a lot of them where there's a difference that you just can't see from the outside. Encouragement in that there's hope, there's therapy, there's medication, there's many strategies that you can adopt to help live your life and to be successful. But also that, like Diana said, it's also your superpower. It's the way your brain is wired, and how exciting is that? And there's so many cool things that you can do because you think differently.
Mm-hmm. So, and I mean, I got on medicine, which really has helped me a lot. I don't take it every day. I don't, they call them vacations or something. I don't know what they're called. Anyway, I don't take it every day, but I definitely take it when I'm teaching. So sometimes I forget, though, like any good ADHD kid,
right.
we forget. But you have to go to a psychiatrist to get medicine. So the psychiatrist was also very interested in the book. And so for me, that's the hope, is that it gives parents of kids who aren't ADHD kids, then it's like, oh, well, now you can explain why you might get frustrated with your friend who's really excited and gets, or, that they're just different. And there's nothing bad. They're not like a special kid in a bad way. You know what I mean? So
they're not trying to be a jerk, when they call out or when they grab or when they have issues with impulsivity. It's just the way their brain is wired. It's harder for them than it is for some other children.
So Veronica had a great question. If you go through a publisher, do you still have have the copyright? Do you still own the copyrights to your material, or does it belong to the publisher? Let's look at the contract.
Yeah, I'm looking at the copyright notice right here. It's still my property. The information contained in this book is the intellectual property of Lydia Rueger and is governed by the United States and international copyright laws. So it still is my work. They've produced it. But I guess that's the answer I can give.
So Andre's in Portugal, and he does a lot. I've had him on the show. He does more graphic novels, and he does work for children too. Mm-hmm. But I think it's more older. I mean, his stuff is amazing. I'm glad you missed the part where I was showing my stuff. You have to go back and watch Andre. I'm just kidding, buddy. But because his stuff's so amazing. He says it's like licensing. So they're licensing it to use it and to print it, and they get they get some of those kickbacks, I guess. Mm-hmm. So one of the things we were talking about, I was driving to work, and I said, Lydia, it's not just that it's this hopeful thing that for ADHD. To me, it's also a testament about how much relationships matter in our industry. And that if I had been a real jerk to work with, or a prima donna as a designer, right? Or if you had, then we probably would definitely not be still friends. But it's just going to say, and Lydia was like, well, this would be really hopeful to people who are younger, that, they need to make these that they're making these long-term relationships. But I said, it's also hopeful to me as somebody who's 46, who's somebody from 20 years ago contacted, that I made a good impression enough, right? That you wanted to work with me and you thought you could work with me. But it's also that maybe we just need to go back in our files and see who maybe doesn't know what we're doing and who you don't really know what they're doing. So maybe it's good to go back in your Rolodex. Fred might not know what a Rolodex is, but because Fred's like 15, but it's this thing that all your contacts were in, and it's not a phone. So, but maybe you need to go back through and reach out to some of those people. So maybe if you're young, you're making good impressions on people who you're with, because you never know where these relationships will go. But it's also so much of my success, I think, and so much of my business is all about relationships, whether I'm a designer working for a company and I've been their designer for 15 years, or I'm working with Lydia. Lydia comes back because we used to work at the same place, and I'd stay till 3 in the morning to get stuff done. There were things, and she knew me, and I think that is an important also part of this story, of our story with this. Can I ask you, and I know you probably, and somebody's now screen printing over there. They're like pressure washing a screen next door. I don't know if you can hear it, but I was thankful that you chose me to illustrate, but I didn't know. And I also am thankful that you believed that I could do it, right?
I was thankful that you said yes.
Well, I was thankful to be asked. I guess I'm glad I said yes to a lot of things, but what was it about something that I was doing, or was it just I was the only designer you knew and I was gullible enough to?
No, not at all. I actually do. I did get on your website to make sure that you did illustration, because I know that you're a designer, but I didn't really know all the things that you've done for the past 20 years. And so, yeah, I did get on your website and I looked at some of your illustration work, and it was whimsical. It was cartoon-like. It was kind of what I imagined, how I imagined my manuscript might be illustrated. And of course, at this point, I didn't know what path that was going to take, but I liked the style. It was comfortable to me. And so that was why I saw that, you were, and I liked the paper collage you had done.
So what was it about?
That was interesting. Oh, and certainly there are tons of car books out there. And, one of the publishers that said no to this manuscript said, I don't think it's so different than any other car manuscript that I've read. And so Diane's illustration is one way that I feel will set our book apart. I don't see a lot of car manuscripts with paper collaged artwork. Maybe there are some out there, but it's just not what I'm seeing. I'm seeing more sleek and shiny looking artwork. And so it was different. It was a different way of thinking, which lends itself to the content of the book as well.
So it's funny. I'm super glad that you liked the collage, because that's definitely where I feel like I can make mistakes and then I can cover it up, and it doesn't, like, I can just, if you're doing a watercolor, like if you mess it up, you messed it up, you got to start over. And so to me, it was really thankful, because if I messed up on something, I could just, like this one, I cut out the wheel on the back by accident. Oops. And then, but like this light is an actual, another piece of paper, and the license plate is a cutout. And so it gives me more flexibility to make mistakes. And there was one piece that I really liked, that I had gotten this new, oh man, what did I do with that? I had gotten this new catalog. We get stuff in the mail all the time. And it was like from Hoffler and Company. It's like it's all their new fonts. And I was like, oh, this is so beautiful. And look, I cut this out because I was like, I loved this. I thought this was so nice. And I got it and literally cut it out that day. And I made the bridge.
Yeah, it's the bridge on the playground, right?
Yeah, the bridge on the playground is from that. So I had to cut it twice. It's not the exact same. But this kind of gives you an idea of the analog part, right? So you see there's this, and then all the black lines really make a difference. Somebody was like, well, I like it like this. And I'm like, yeah, but you can't tell that that's a that's like a thing that you climb into, and it, you know, it has a bridge, and you just don't get it if you don't see the whole with the black line. So I think the black lines really gave it something else. And it also gave me, again, confidence that I could, working on the iPad, I could erase things really easy. I could print it out. And to me, it gave me, I didn't feel like I was going to fail. And if I messed up, I could just start over again.
Right. I liked in some early versions when we were looking at Victor and what he was going to look like. I remember we talked about, oh, we like him, but can we take off the bumper? And so the collage lent itself really well to that. Like, I like him, but with a different bumper or with a different smile or different eyes,
right?
or something like that.
We had his bumper. I had his bumper in the beginning. It was red and it was his smile. And you were like, let's try something else. And I think, and that's what I'm using. I was using Procreate, Andre. I was using Dustin's brushes, and I put the brushes in there. I'm going to share this really fast just so you guys can see what some of these brushes are. But this is the one I used for the dry gouache, is how I wrote Victor in the Vroom. And then I think I used the Dixon. This is Jane's path. This is Nick's path. And then let's see. Oh, bookers. It's right under. This is Victor's path. So the scrumbling, I can't even see what it says. Scrumbling something, invert, I think. But it, to me, and that's how I made that those checkered flags, Lydia. I just used that brush.
Oh, right.
So to me, this is, you know, you're like, how can you use this? But Dustin, you know, this was Sam's path, or maybe this was, because to me, it was really nice to have, I mean, these are things that Dustin does, right? Or somebody or Lydia or somebody else that he's hired that does these illustrations. But it's funny that we can still kind of go over the top, and what I did was nothing like this, but it was nice to be able to use some of these different textures, which, again, sometimes I don't know how to use those, you know, like how is that, how am I going to use that thing, you know, if I buy this brush pack. So it was really nice. So we're going to wrap it up because I know we've gone a little long, and I've got another meeting, and I can't wait. I just, I want to share this with you guys. So if you want to check out, there is a hardcover coming. I believe they are coming soon. I'm going to put the ISBNs so you can go to your local bookstore soon and get these. You could probably go ahead and order them with these ISBNs, and they're all going to be underneath if you are watching on YouTube. And then if you want to check out Lydia, and we're going to create a page on her site with the Victor the Vroom stuff. That's one of our next steps, right? But you can check her out at Lydia, LYDIA RUEGER, Lydia Rueger, right? That's how you say it last name.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. It's been a few years.
I
might not. Yeah, say it.
You're not saying my last name every day. Yeah.
Yeah, no. And then her Twitter handle is LA Rueger, RUEGER, and then Instagram is Lydia Rueger. So you guys can follow her as well. But then if you wanted to do the, I thought I had Victor's the thing from, well, let me get it really fast, from Amazon. If you just have to have it today.
Oh, right. You can order today. Yeah.
And you can get it tomorrow, possibly, if you are, but it is going to be paperback. So it's telling me I already purchased this. I'm like, yeah, I know. Yeah. So hopefully I will get it in the next. My sister got hers on Monday. We got it. It was up on Friday. And it's funny. She's like, yeah, I got it. I'm like, did you read it yet? Oh, no, not yet. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe tomorrow. I mean, it's 32 pages, but Lord, it's like, you know, I don't know, 80 words. It's not that much, buddy. Right. But anyway, so there's the Amazon link, and we would love some ratings. That would be a way to help us and to share. And again, there's lots of underlying things. Using the Lexan font for me was really important. Using the envelopes was also really an important part of just something that's often overlooked, and you're able to use something that a lot of people just think is trash. So anyway, so Maria says she's already following you. Yeah, you and Maria should probably because Maria does a lot of stuff for parents of
Oh, great.
creative, right? She's a designer, so people who are also in that creative field that would.
Oh, great. No, I'll tell you, I haven't been on there much since we've been working on this book. So now it's time to get back to
So Maria's
your presence.
parents that design. So
Awesome. Oh, that's great.
So Amanda, thank you so much. I appreciate you guys all coming out on a Thursday and watching this. I was like, let's just do a podcast. And she's like, okay, I've never done one. What do I need? And I'm like, you just need earbuds and a mic on your earbuds. So I just wanted to tell you, thank you guys. You can always follow me at designrecharge.org or rechargingyou.com. And I just appreciate you guys doing this and watching, and hopefully it gives you some hope that maybe you could do this too. And some old relationship might come back
Yes.
and really make a difference, because this was super joyful for me.
Me too. For me too.
All right. Well, we'll see you guys in the new year. And you know what? All of January, I believe, is going to be about mental health. So I'm excited. I will definitely intro a little bit about Victor in there, but we're going to be talking to a few people who are going to be sharing about their mental health. I think it's always good to start the year. I always think January can be really kind of depressing too. So we'll hopefully start it off with a bang and see how other people have really taken that part of who they are and also made that maybe a superpower or something, how they've been able to get through things. So I hope you guys will join me in January.